Hello, and welcome back to Kenny Sports Guys Podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Severa, and I'm here to talk to you about the biggest stories in sports. And today we have a special guest, Jack Easterby. Jack is the former executive president of football operations for the Houston Texans. Starting his career with the Jaguars, Easterby went on to have a successful career with the New England Patriots and Houston Texans. Please welcome to the show, Jack Easterby. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Jack.
Yeah, how you doing, man? Thanks so much for having me.
Doing good, doing good. Thank you for asking. So, the first question I have for you tonight is what made you pursue a career in sports, specifically in the executive department?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate growing up. Sports was such a huge part of our lives, and my dad ran kind of I would just say, youth basketball league is the best way to describe it in our town in Columbia, South Carolina. And so every week I saw him kind of oversee the basketball rivalries and the basketball matchups in our city with all the youth basketball. So he did, whether that was scheduling officials or scheduling, the different things that went on to make that league possible. And so I, from a young age, saw the impact of sports and saw how awesome sports could be to make a difference in people's lives, but also just the fun competitiveness of how you can, have a job that, helps things run better, helps teams function better. And then also during that time when I was growing up in Columbia, the University of South Carolina joined the SEC. And so there was a huge boom of the sports scene in Columbia, South Carolina, where all of a
Mm,
sudden now, instead of having just kind of the average teams come to town. The SEC was coming to town. And so huge football rivalries, huge basketball rivalries. Obviously, the profile of sports was increased. And so the combination of watching my dad impact our community through basketball and then watching the University of South Carolina there in the city I grew up, it just got me curious, got me excited about the opportunity to go and to be a part of sports, both as a person, but also eventually professionally. And then went to college and had a chance to play sports in college, which was informative and educational. And then when I got done, I felt like, hey, listen, let's see if we can try this for a job. So we had a great opportunity to go and intern in Jacksonville for the Jaguars. And I really enjoyed that. And then went back to the University of South Carolina in Columbia for a long time. And then couple of years in Kansas City were great informative processes. You mentioned the New England experience was really cool,
hmm
and then Houston. So I've always just loved the idea of how how sports impacts people, and how sports teaches you so many different lessons, and how fun it is to start with a beginning slate of 0-0, and how that team navigates that year. Or just all the things that sports can bring a community of people. So I've always loved that and thought if there's any way to be a part of it, I would love to do that. So that's kind of been my journey. But I've really enjoyed every level of sports, right? Going all the way back to youth basketball to the NFL. It's all been so fun. And sports is unlike anything else. I told somebody the other day, it's like sports and music really, if you think about it, like you drop a ball in the middle of a field somewhere, it doesn't matter where you are, and you know that that can bring people together, right? Or you cut on a song, in the
exactly.
middle of nowhere. It's just sports and music have something about it internationally and really worldwide. Both of them can bring people together and can impact people. And so I've just loved the opportunity that sports brings.
Yeah, I like what you said. Basically, there are three things that could bring people together: food, sports, and music.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And man, I tell you, when you're in sports, you learn a lot about food too, because I feel like a lot of times when you're traveling with these teams and obviously all of the high performance, matrices and high performance systems that you're in, I mean, what you eat is a huge part of it. So there's a lot of traveling, a lot of eating, and a lot of fueling for athletes. So you're right. Food is probably just as important.
So our next question is: it's no big secret that you work with the Patriots and the Texans. What was your overall vision during your time there in the NFL, And how did it align with your team's long-term goals?
Yeah, I think whatever role you have in any sporting team, you just want to help the team get better, and I think every department does that differently. Every staff member does that differently. Obviously, I was very fortunate with Coach Belichick where he gave me some really cool roles where my job was to serve the players and the coaches in specific ways. And I was very fortunate in Houston to get some very specific roles where hey, listen, this is what we're going to try to do to help the team. And I think when you're in a professional sports team for sure, the goal is for the team to improve. And that looks different places, right? Depending on the history of that team and the problems
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to solve. But I think that each year you want to hopefully help the team take a next step. And so for me, I really was so thankful to learn from Bill in New England about how each year is so different, right? And how you have to take that year's problems in and then be aggressive in trying to solve them. And so I would just simply say the mission of most of the places that I've worked has always been just help the team get better, help the team get better in whatever way that is.
So the next question I have is, let's move out of the football operations portion of the NFL and let's focus on the business aspect of it. One question that always wanders in my mind whenever I watch an NFL game is, how do the team and owner make money out of all this? Like, I always been very curious about it. So can you enlighten me on how this actually works?
Yeah, well, I would say the NFL is an amazing business. The owners, the commissioner have done a great job of creating a product that everybody wants to see, right? And that didn't just happen, right? That evolved over a series of years. NFL has always been a huge revenue generating sport, but recently the revenues that they've been able to put on the table have just been massive and incrementally increased over the last several years. Obviously, there's a huge component of media rights that go with the NFL, right? So the idea
Mm-hmm.
that these different content providers pay the NFL and put different money on the table to be able to have the right to do that. I think is one of the primary ways to do it. Obviously, there's tickets, there's gear and licensing that, and then different sub programs that each group puts on, whether it's the marketing department or it's the ticketing department or any of those types of things can create revenue. But the main revenue source in the league is those media rights, right? And how big it is. And really, it's interesting if you look at Major League Baseball and the NFL and then the NBA, all of them receive different amounts of their total revenue from the media rights. And the NFL receives a big chunk of their revenue from the media rights deals that they've been able to negotiate, and they've done a great job of that. And then they've added even more with additional game here recently, and then obviously some of the playoff games that they've been able to sell to Peacock and to Netflix and some of the Christmas games and some of those other ones that they've been able to create even additional revenue streams. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways the NFL makes money, primarily through the media rights agreements that they've been able to create. But they've done a great job creating a product that our whole country consumes and really the whole world consumes. If you think about it, with this international movement that's going on right now, I mean, there's just amazing impact around the world when the NFL puts a game in Germany or obviously in the UK, just tons of interest. So, a lot of the streaming and or media consumption that goes on just creates an amazing platform for the NFL to sell product, to, create a need for their product and then continually, produce a great product.
So let's talk about the validation of NFL franchise. How does one validate the worth of an NFL franchise?
It's interesting that's hard to do. It's hard to quantify exactly each franchise and what they're worth. Some of it is in the market size, some of it's in the profitability, some of it is in the historical revenue that team has been able to produce. but it's very difficult to quantify down to the dollar, right? The last several
Hmm.
franchises that have been sold, they've brought in banks or high-level consulting firms that have helped with those. And I think that when they do that, they bring in the opportunity to try to quantify those dollars, right? To try to get it down to a price that both sides can agree on, but it's very difficult. A lot of what is used is the ability to be profitable in the run in the future, right? So the idea of, anytime a company is bought or sold, a lot of times you're looking at earnings, revenue, and projected revenue. Obviously, because the NFL is not a public entity, you can't exactly quantify how many earnings per share or how many, obviously, you know, 10 times earnings, 12 times earnings, what they would sell for. But you can get close by understanding the profitability in the future and understanding the upside of what the annual income is each year. Fortunately, for the NFL, they've got a great salary cap in place where they're able to split the earnings with the players in a fair way, but then also remain profitable. So that helps somewhat certainly guarantee that they'll make money because it limits the salary pool to about half of the money that comes in from a profit revenue or profit standpoint. So yeah, I would say you can never really all the way nail down exactly how much it's worth until you see how much somebody would pay for it. That's how you quantify it, is when somebody writes you a check, that's how much it's worth. But I think through revenues increasing and through measuring those and through looking at the marketplace over the last several years as different teams have transitioned from one group of ownership to another, I think that's how you say market value.
So, in your opinion, who is the richest team in the NFL in terms of validation?
Well, a lot of media outlets have continued to put the Dallas Cowboys at the top. I think the Dallas Cowboys have done a great job with their marketing efforts and their revenues. They seem to have an incredible ability to both increase their brand, but then also increase their offerings, right? Whether that's Netflix series is well, obviously they have a huge facility down there that they host people, and they've done a bunch of different things with that. So the Dallas Cowboys seem to be the top ranking NFL franchise based on, what we read and study. Now, obviously it hasn't changed hands, and I don't think it will change hands soon. So again, you don't know how much something's worth until somebody actually pays that price. But it looks like they're the top um, earner and potentially have the highest valuation right now in the NFL.
So, there are two types of rich teams in the NFL, in my opinion. You got the super rich teams, and you got the less not so rich teams. What are your thoughts on the financial gap between the richest team and the not so rich teams in the NFL?
Yeah, well, there's a huge structure element to each team on how they're obviously making their money, but also the expenses they have, right? Do they own their
Hmm.
stadium? Do they have a lease? Do they have a sublease? Are they working through buying their own property? How do they manage and take care of their practice facility? Obviously, there's tons of different things that go on the revenue side to determine ultimately who is making the most money. We've seen here recently some of the teams, in order to expand, like Buffalo and a few others, obviously Vegas, they've taken on some private equity partners or some minor minority owners that have infused some capital into the business, which has been good, I think, overall to help improve valuations, but also help them spend on the team and help them get some of these capex things that they need to knock out done. So I would say, from a standpoint of the differentiation, I think each club is in their own evolution, right? Like some clubs, LA has moved recently, St. Louis to LA, obviously Vegas moved from Oakland. That's a whole different, that creates a challenge from a revenue standpoint when you're starting from scratch facility wise and different things like that. Others have been in the same place for a long time, but maybe they've changed ownership groups. And so each place has its own kind of track that it's on to become more profitable and the things that need to go on there. So it's very difficult to say how each one potentially is ranked because it's on its own journey. I know that when Mr. Kraft, for example, bought the stadium up in Foxborough, he bought the stadium first and then bought the team after that, right? And so he kind of iterated himself into ownership, and then created an amazing facility up there where now they host anything from lacrosse championships to concerts in the summer to obviously great football. So I would say each place is on their own journey to profitability. And I think that, yes, there is a gap in some that are more profitable than others based on where they are today, but they're all kind of racing up and they're all growing their popularity.
So, what would you say factors are leading into the story valuations for NFL franchises, and how are NFL executives redefining leadership to balance sports performance with business acumen?
Well, I think, the profitability we talked about earlier is, a lot of times is tied to not only the spending, but the media rights deals and the income. So I think that, for people who are running franchises right now, it's a very big challenge to say, okay, we want to be good, but we also want to be profitable. And to be
Mm.
good, you got to spend, right? You got to spend on players. You have to spend on the entertainment. You have to spend on the stadium. You have to spend to obviously shore up the product, to make the product exciting and to make the product professional. But at the same time, if you spend, that cuts into your revenue. So it cuts into what you make overall. So I think there's a huge balance in the ability to spend on the right things, to spend on players who are durable, to spend on coaches and executives who are consistent, who make good decisions, and to spend on facilities that you can continually maintain and upgrade for a long window and you can pivot with them, right? So you don't want to be upgrading a facility and then have to move out in a year. You don't want to be paying a huge free agent and then a year later he's not there anymore. You don't want to be, again, changing coaches in front office a bunch because those things can eat into your profitability and sometimes the traction that you have with your fans. So I think it's a challenge to spend on the right things so that you can continue to have traction both on the performance side and on the finance side.
So, I've been doing this research via this interview, and I stumbled upon a term called operator dash CEO. Can you explain to me the key qualities of a successful operator dash CEO for
Yeah.
from
So
sorry.
yeah, it's a good question. I think when I got to New England, one of the people that I was blessed to meet was Sam Presti. Sam was from the Boston area, but he was running the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I really began to study. He drafted the big three there with Durant and Harden and KD and Westbrook, and then he traded all of them, and they reset, and then obviously got Billy Donovan, and they established a really good program and then he reset, and there was a huge, and then he's been trading for picks and now has reset. And so I leaned into Sam as kind of saying, hey, can you explain to me how all this works? Another great one is Howie Roseman, right? Mark Shapiro.
Mm-hmm.
There's guys
All good
that
men.
yeah, that have really leaned into the idea of this operator CEO. And I think the concept behind it is, hey, when you're resetting, you got to be forthright with that, and you've got to make good fiscal responsibility decisions. And you've got to be able to say, hey, this is a reset year, or hey, we're doing this in this one area of the program to be able to hopefully help us in the future. And that's got to be a momentum builder for you. And you got to be straight up with that and transparent. Hey, we're trading this player. I understand that means we may not be as good tomorrow, but this is going to help us in the future. And so, as I began to study that, I really learned that the difference in a lot of these amazing organizations and some of the ones that haven't quite gotten traction yet is having an operator like that who's willing to make bold moves, right? You think of what Theo Epstein did, both of the places that he was able to really have success right in Boston and Chicago. He was able to go in as the operator, the CEO operator, and create both fiscally smart decisions and fiscally smart, operating procedures. And then also, athletically based or athletically smart and performance wise decisions. And so I think it's both, man. It's the ability to have a really in-depth fiscal awareness, and then also a competition or a strategic awareness for the performance side. And when you can do both of those and be sincere and honest about it as you build, that's what separates some of the best from the rest.
Now, NFL executives, let's just say they don't have the most easiest job running a football operations. So, what challenges do NFL executives face in navigating high-stake environments, like either in the playoffs or a major trade decision?
Yeah, I think a lot of and this is not just obviously the NFL, but anything in leadership now is just trying to make sure you're leading inside out, right? Making sure that the building and the people you lead know who you are, what you're about, and that you have a consistency about you that they can follow, right? Because it's really noisy. There's a lot of things out there that are inaccurate, and people just take things and run with them and say whatever, and then you're having to mitigate and kind of disaster control all of the noise. If you can create good relationships inside the building, and you can make sure people know your mission, they know your heart, they know who you are, then obviously you can solve most any problem that comes in the door. But if you can't get the noise out, it makes it very difficult. So probably one of the top things that I struggled with, and I think a lot of people struggle with, is how do you make sure you keep the noise out? How do you make sure that you keep the out of context opinions or the bad articles or the frustrated fans or whatever? How do you keep their loud noise out to continue to make the right next decision and to continue to have everybody stay on board with you? And that's tough. And there's, some that do that better than others. But right now, I would say keeping the noise out is the number one way, or the number one challenge for any executive in a high profile sport, because it is loud. Obviously, the
Yes,
attention
it is.
the attention that sports gets is great. People are passionate about their fan base, and or their fan bases are passionate about their team, and there's all excitement and all types of things, right? But in the end, that also creates a lot of pressure and a lot of noise.
All right, enough with the business talk and the football operations talk. So, as you already know, the NFL playoffs recently is concluded. So we have two teams that are making it to the Super Bowl. They're gonna play in New Orleans 2 weeks from now. So we have the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Who do you have winning the Super Bowl?
Wow, so put me on the spot. Listen, I this is probably an unpopular pick, but just watching the games and watching this year unfold, I really like the way that Philadelphia is committed to their run game. I think their offensive line controls the line of scrimmage in a unique way. I think with Saquon, but then also any back, Saquon jumped out there for a few plays, and they put some other guys in there last game in the NFC Championship, and they seem to really be able to run the ball both inside the tackles and on stretch plays and all types of plays. And I just think that the way they run the football is pretty tough, and it makes them hard to beat because they can control the game in such a way. And if you remember back to the last matchup, really, I mean, there was really nothing else you would ask Jalen Hurts to do. He played so well. Really, it came down to one or two plays at the end of the game, right, that Patrick made, and that I think it was one corner. I can't remember who it was. Maybe had one penalty that was a big play, that allowed Kansas City to end up winning. So I would pick Philadelphia in a close one because I really think the way they can run the ball and control the clock and control the line of scrimmage is going to be a difference maker. And it has been when they have not even played their best on offense, because they can get 3 yards, 6 yards. They just get early down good yardage in the run game. It limits their third down and distance and seems to make them a high conversion team. So I'm going Philly in a low scoring game where they control the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the Eagles are actually a very good football team. I think Saquon is going to run for over at least maybe 100 yards in the Super Bowl. I think Saquon should actually win and or at least get some votes in the NFL MVP conversation because he's helping the Eagles. Like he's basically carrying the Eagles throughout this postseason and the season. But as for Kansas City, I think Kansas City, I don't know. I just feels like they weren't the same team as the last two championship teams. I mean, the offense has been a little bit disappointing so far, but the defense is actually stepping up. But man, it's actually a really tough decision to make. But I will have to go with the Eagles. I think the Eagles are a team of destiny. I think Saquon is going to run wild in the Super Bowl. And I think Philadelphia is going to be happy on the end of the night, February 9th.
Yeah, it's interesting because
It's
if you think about, the year, obviously everybody anticipated the Chiefs, being good, but everybody talked about how many close wins they had, and obviously they didn't
exactly.
mate early on. The thing that I would just say though, last week, I mean, Jaden Daniels is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, period. I mean, I know he's a rookie, but he makes great decisions with the football. He just makes great decisions. So he's not going to beat himself. And if you look at it, in that type of game, so put Mahomes in his spot and, play that game out that way. I mean, I know Mahomes is better than Daniels. He's got more experience, but in the end, I think the way that Philadelphia plays football right now, they shrink the clock, they possess the ball, they put long drives together, and it brings up an interesting point about the most valuable player, right? Because Saquon probably was the most valuable to his team. The question is, what is the award changing? Is the award is still a quarterback award, or are we really looking into who the most valuable player to each team was? Because you could make an argument one of the most valuable players on the Super Bowl field might be Joe Tooney, right? Who
Yeah,
played
I
guard
agree.
and he kicks out the tackle and he's played Pro Bowl level tackle and he's an awesome guy. We had him in New England and he's just awesome. So, it's if you did the truly who's the most valuable player, it brings in a whole lot more people than just a quarterback.
Yeah, so it actually segues nicely to my next question. Who are your MVP picks?
Wow. Yeah. It's funny. I've been looking at the Josh Allen Lamar debate a lot, right? Because they kind of ramped up to get to play and looked at, and I was really overwhelmed by Lamar's statistics. I didn't watch every game that Lamar played, so transparently, I can't say, hey, he's unequivocally better than this guy. But I would say, in my guess of what I would have seen, it'd be a kind of a duke off between Lamar and Saquon. I think those two guys. Obviously, Josh had a great year and he's special. There's no doubt, but I would probably put Lamar one, Saquon two, and Allen three, with the benefit of watching last week's game and the benefit of the playoffs in that voting. I think I'd probably, still go with Lamar one, Saquon two, and then Allen three.
Yeah, for me, I would have to change that a little bit. So I will go with Josh Allen first, then Lamar Jackson second, and Saquon Barkley third. I just feel like Allen had a little bit of a better season than Lamar in terms of the Bills were supposed to be a rebuilding team this year, and somehow they made it work. They got rid of Stephon Diggs earlier this offseason, and they just made it to the AFC Championship game, and I feel like Josh Allen actually helped them carry them. But I would have to say, uh, um, Josh
Oh yeah,
Allen,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, no doubt.
yeah, Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, and Lamar Jackson. Because I think you can't ignore what Saquon did this year. You can't really ignore it.
Right, right. There's no doubt. And I just think to me, when I go to like say, okay, is it Saquon? I have a hard time not including the offensive line for the Philadelphia Eagles. They're so
Hmm.
gifted, they're so well coached, so organized. So that's kind of like an offensive run game award almost versus just a player. You know what I mean?
They should have a running back award, actually. All
Right.
right, the last question I have for you is where can people find you on social media?
Well, I'm not a huge social attractor guy. I do have X and I've enjoyed learning through it. I think, gosh, social media has really changed, over the last several years. I've really enjoyed reading and following different people on social media myself, and learning so much you can learn now on social media with stuff out there, and different leadership stuff, and obviously podcasts and other things. I tell you what has been really cool for me has been the last year. I've been back on the East Coast, and looking at a lot of these different colleges and universities, and what they put out about their student athletes, and watching some of the ACC, SEC, in the region. I live in Charlotte, and so a lot of them, watching what they put out about their student athletes, and bragging on how talented they are, and what they've accomplished. So I've really enjoyed following college sports social media the last year or so, and watching some of the coolest things that have happened. But definitely, I'm not necessarily looking for, trying to put following me out there. If people want to follow, that's great. But I'm so thankful for just all the different experiences I've had, and hopefully the opportunity to serve other people.
Well, Jack, that's all the questions I have for you today. I want to thank you personally for the time.
Okay, brother. Thanks so much, man. Keep it up in New York.
Definitely, I will. Keep it up in Charlotte, okay? Well, that's the end of this episode. I want to thank Jack Easterby for the time. You can find this episode on Kenny the Sports Guy podcast on KennySportsGuy.com, Kenny with two N's, Spotify, Amazon Music, and all streaming platforms. In addition, you can follow me on Twitter at Kenny_sports, Instagram at KennySportsGuy1, and TikTok at Kenny Sports Podcast. Until the next episode, keep it sporty.